transition from every profession into business ownership is that there's the things of the business that you were really good at. But no matter what you did before, there are going to be several hats that you have to wear in owning the company. And so there's always that experience and knowledge gap. And so, Google solves a lot of it. Asking advice from friends solves a lot of it, but nothing solves it more than just getting in there and doing it and starting to figure it out and and answer those questions as they come up.
This is Biz Ninja Entrepreneur Radio with your host, Tyler Jorgensen.
Welcome out to Biz Ninja Entrepreneur Radio. I am your host, Tyler Jorgensen, and today we have an amazing entrepreneur who's coming to us all the way from across the pond over in the UK to talk to us about his wine startup. And I really love the concept of what he's got going on. So welcome, Leslie Owensby of Defy Wine.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
So Leslie, we're going to kind of jump back and forth in your journey a little bit. We're going to go all the way back to the beginning, and then we're going to talk about what you're working on now. When was the first moment of your life where you realized you're an entrepreneur?
Oh gosh, nobody's ever asked me that before. That's a fantastic question. So I've been involved I've been a consultant for about 20 years now in the product and user research space across a number of industries. And I've worked with a lot of startups. I've been part of friends' startups to help them, lending my skills and time to that. But to be honest with you, it was probably really late. I didn't realize my desire and passion for that probably until about 5 or 6 years ago. And then it really kind of sunk in my brain and I was starting to think about it.
Yeah. So a few years back, all of a sudden you started thinking, maybe I need to do something on my own, right? How did you come up with the idea of what you were going to do? What was the first spark?
It actually was about wine. Like Defy's my first thing. Now I've kind of started a second thing after that, quickly realizing that I just can't do the two at once, really. Like I got to pick something, pick a lane, pick a horse, and kind of just really go deep on this one thing. But it was something that I started to think about. Everything I do, everything I had done has been digital.
Yeah.
You know, it's been 2D, it's been services, it's been APIs, there's a little bit of physical stuff, and a little bit of Internet of Things for some companies, for an energy company. But it wasn't until I stopped and thought about it, I realized I always have this love for packaging, like physical packaging. And there was something about it. I'd go into shops, it'd drive my friends insane, and my wife going in and picking things up and touching them and looking at them, how things were presented, the psychology about what it made it desirable to me, what made it desirable to other people. And it's this little kind of thing you could take home and you could have with you. In some cases, we kind of curate our homes and our lives with these things that we get. And I kind of realized that, and I started to tie it into wine because I always like to say I fell in love with wine late in my drinking career. Like as a student, you know, and freshly out of a student being, you know, poor and broke, like wine was complex and it didn't have to be expensive. You don't realize that because everyone, at least in the UK and US, is like, oh, you got to spend money on a good bottle of wine. Whereas if you go to the right place, you don't really have to. And it all kind of depends on what you want. And it was just so different and so varied. Like by the time I found one and I could afford it, I couldn't find the same one again. All these different points of date, like beer, spirits, cider, easy. I knew what I was going to get. I find a good one, I could just keep buying that.
Yep.
And years passed until I finally fell in love with like this red wine from a friend of mine who happens to be a certified sommelier here in the UK. And I was just like, well, that's amazing. So we bought a case together. And then that kind of kicked me off. And I was just opening up to this world of wine. But that was the thing. It always kind of stuck with me. It's like, it's complicated, it's obfuscated. And I was like, you know what? I want to do my own physical thing. I want to do my own package thing. And the other side of this is I love food. Like I grew up in South Texas. Most of my family's from the deep South, lots of time with, my grandparents, aunts and uncles, big family meals, home cooked meals most of the time. But there's very few foods to me that you make and they're meant to travel, if you know what I mean. You want a nice steak dinner, you want a nice apple pie. You're not really going to buy it in a can,
right.
or a jar or something like that.
Right.
But wine's one of those things that's meant to do that. There's all this science and chaos that goes into planting these vines and growing these things. You make it all these different ways, none of them right or wrong, just different. And you put it in this container and you can design this cool label and then somebody else can enjoy it in another part of the world. And I love that. So I wanted to combine that with something accessible. So I kind of went, yeah, I want to try this myself. I want to do something. I want to make my own wine company, but I want to make it a little bit different. I want to make a good quality wine, and I want to make it really accessible and easy. And that's what kind of kicked things off for me. And
I love this. So, I mean, as of right now, you're launching with 3 core products, and you're in the UK, you're going to be selling into the US, here soon. But so we can talk about probably a lot of the obstacles you had to overcome.
Sure.
But what was that first big hurdle when you went from the ideation of it to actually making it real? What was that first big hurdle that you had to overcome, and how did you overcome it?
I think the main way I overcame anything, I'll talk about what those are, is probably through absolute stubborn perseverance more than anything. A lot of people tell me that's what you need in this business. I've kind of realized that. I like to say that everything that could have gone wrong has gone wrong at some point along the way. But the biggest thing for me, and I kind of realized this with all the other projects I've ever worked on, was like, what do we know? What do we not know? And what do we think we don't know? Like, what they like to say, the unknown unknowns. And of course, we were talking a little bit before we started rolling, things are easier now for people to do these things and to get up and running. There's a lot more information. There's a lot more services. But I still kind of thought, now I launched the business in 2018. I was kind of having these ideas into 2016, into 2017. And I was like, surely I can just push button drop ship this stuff, right? I find the wine, find the transport, find the canner, got a warehouse, hook up a website, boom, you're done. Easy. Not true in the slightest. So the first thing was like, okay, what do I even legally need to do to sell alcohol? I know it's regulated. What does that look like? Who do I speak to? How do I go about all those things to make sure I'm totally compliant? Right. And then how do I do everything else? How do I find, I don't have money to own the full vertical about wine growing.
Right.
How do I do that? And that's at least one of my strengths, I kind of think, is, aside from the stubborn perseverance, is being able to break down a project to kind of go like, I'm here and I can see the next horizon. What are all the things I think I need to do to get from here to there? And how do I break those down? And how do I kind of check them off my list and make progress in every single one of those? So I'm pretty diligent about gathering information and setting those goals and checking those things off and kind of going, okay, licensing, what do I need? What does that look like? Okay, of course I know I needed a company and incorporate here in the UK. And, okay, well, how do I do this? How do I do that? How does my wine get from here to there? And one of the things I quickly realized, being a shy kid years and years ago, I'm not anymore, is ask for help. This business I absolutely love because the amount of help I've gotten from people you might think are competitors, and probably on paper we are. Sure. But we've helped each other out, other people in the business and the industry, to kind of go, hey, I'm holding my hand up. I have no idea what to do here. What's an idea? I've gotten bad advice. I've gotten advice that hasn't worked out, but it's allowed me to kind of make progress. So I think the first thing was just figuring out, what the heck do I do?
Right. Yeah.
How do I do this and not go to jail for it?
So you've got the legal thing. You've got the legal part of it. You've got to figure out pretty quickly. You've got the, then you've got the branding you've got to go through. Then you've got to actually source product and the actual product development. When was, you've gotten all this going. When was the moment where you realized, you said you started ideating on this back in 2016, right? When was the moment where you finally said, you know what? I think I have something with DeFi. I think this is it's going to work out.
Oh, okay. So I thought initially you're kind of like heading towards, when did you kind of think I want to do this? So when I thought it was going to work out, that's kind of my levels of confidence have grown every month and every year, because there's been a bit of a lull on the journey. Like I launched this thing while consulting full time. I'm completely bootstrapped, no funding behind me, all been my own money I've put into it. And nice thing is I can hold my hand up and say, like, I don't have any debt either, which is quite nice about it.
That is cool.
But, it's been this difficult thing of like, I thought it had legs. I thought like, this is something that I think the market's growing. I started to look at the market and I think, look, canned wine's growing here in the UK. Like I said, I didn't incorporate the company until 2018 and really start to dive deep. Like I visited lots of vineyards across Europe, mainly Italy, because I knew the area a bit better. I had a friend who spoke Italian who kind of came with me to help with that, and really began to dive into this thing. But it's been a constant up and down of like, oh, I need to can this thing. How do I do that? Who can can it? What are the prices? And then you have someone going, you got to do 10,000 liters for us to talk to you. And you're like, all right, I'm done. I can't do this. But like I said, there's that stubborn perseverance. And I was like, oh no, there's got to be a way. Like I like to tell people, like my first canning experience was with the canners. And the only reason I got that run was because I kind of politely didn't let up for 6 months. And the guy even said, and he was like, this was your perseverance that made this happen. And also I was open and honest. I was like, I will pay you up front. I'm not going to lie to you and tell you I'm going to do like huge volumes. This is all I can afford to do. What is your absolute minimum we can put through your line to test this thing out?
Yep.
Because I just COGS will be terrible, but I can't afford to do this. That's another thing. Despite all my experience, like COGS wasn't a term that came across my desk and the things I did before. I had a friend ask me, what are your COGS like? I had to quickly Google what is COGS.
Yes. Yeah. And you know what? This is what's fascinating about when you transition from consulting into business ownership, or it's really transition from every profession into business ownership, is that there's the things of the business that you were really good at. But no matter what you did before, there are going to be several hats that you have to wear in owning the company. And so there's always that experience and knowledge gap. And so, yeah, Google solves a lot of it. Asking advice from friends solves a lot of it, but nothing solves it more than just getting in there and doing it and starting to figure it out and and answer those questions as they come up. Right. And so, so you got through your perseverance, your stubborn perseverance got you to your first run of product. How'd you get your first sale?
Same. I mean, to be honest with you, I'll kind of walk you through like a super brief history, and we can go to any parts you want.
Awesome.
But like I said, consulting full time, this was all evenings and weekends, like just grinding every single day. You know, it's that whole thing. You know, there's tons of sayings like it, but like, you know, work is, you know, your startup or whatever is like 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration, and you know that is absolutely true. It's like turning up, it's doing the work, it's making sure you're making progress, it's trying to stay sane at the same time and not kill yourself and look after yourself. But it was just doing that, and all this time was really research and development for me, because again, I kind of thought surely I can do these things, and I pretty quickly realized and learned more and more with each stage. You can't just do this. Like for what I wanted to do, for putting, I didn't want to make wine grocery. I didn't want to make like, oh, let's bring people wine and make it cheaper.
Right.
You know, it's a great quality wine. I wanted to put a premium wine into an accessible product. And I kind of get a kick out of the fact that it's a can. I love the temporary nature.
Yeah.
Not a Buddhist, kind of this Buddhist thing of like, I designed this thing, I made it, we grew it in Abruzzo. I can enjoy it in a, you know, rainy night in London. You can enjoy it anywhere in, you know, in the States. My family can enjoy it down in Texas. Somebody else can enjoy it up in New York, like whatever, you know, this is up for you to have how you want. You drink it, you crush it. The whole thing can be recycled into another can again. It's like this beautiful thing. It's like you have it, then it's gone. Like this isn't meant to have a permanent place in your life. You enjoy that, that's yours. And that's what I wanted to make. And I quickly learned and realized through doing and through talking and testing things, you can't just put any wine into a can.
Right.
So I knew, like, for me, one of the things I always had drilled into me, I wanted to do was, you know, like I said, self-funded and all that. But part of that was I wanted to prove it.
Sure.
I wanted to prove to myself, like I would, maybe this is bad business. I always tell people, like, I wouldn't want to take someone's money and kind of go, I'm going to gamble your money on figuring this thing out. I kind of wanted to be like, I've done it. I've got supply chain. I've reduced fragility. I've got
I don't think that's bad business. I think that's actually really good business. I think too many people are willing to take on capital when they haven't gone through the like actually checked things out. Right. I'm a huge fan of testing before you make the decision to invest or take on investment.
And well, that's what, I don't know if it was part of my upbringing or part of my work, but that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to prove it. Because for me, like, product market fit is when someone goes, take my money.
Yep.
And then the best thing after that is take my money again. Like, I want to keep buying this thing. Not like, oh, that looks cool, I definitely buy that. But like,
and when you say somebody, that somebody should be a consumer, right? The person buying the product, not the investor, right? So if a consumer wants the product, now you know you actually have something. And whenever we're talking with brands, we always say the first dollar that really matters is the sale that came from a stranger. not your family or your friend or someone like that, because that's the market responding, not your family and friends responding. And so I fully agree with everything you're saying there. I think that's a really good way to prove it. So you stayed perseverance, keep going on your story on what were your next steps.
Yeah. So sorry, I told you I'm long-winded, so I don't mean
you're
to be,
good.
but it was, so I was testing these things out, right? And this is all the things you talked about, all those hats you have to wear. So I don't even have a good financial model at this point. I'm just doing some really basic math and kind of going, I'm sure I can work this out. People want wine. Canned wines are growing. I know they grew in the US, are still growing there. And I hadn't done any real market research like I have now to have like the numbers and the data on the growth of RTD wine, of canned wine, of organic, of all these things. UK, they were growing at the time, better 2018 than 2016 and much better now than it was then. So I was like, okay, this looks like it has legs, but like, how do I get that quality product? What do I need to do? How do I produce the wine to taste good from a can and from the keg? And how do I produce a wine? Because I wanted that thing of like that I think can be had with or without food. I don't like wine that you just have to have with food. Yeah. That's just me. Like if I'm going to produce this mass product, I want you to have more opportunity to enjoy it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And, I don't want any chemicals added to it. We're completely organic, no pesticides, we've got no chemicals. All the sulfites are just naturally occurring. All these things. So how do I get that good quality product into a can? And what is all the stuff I don't know about from the vineyard to the canning facility to the can? So there's a lot of learning there. So all this stuff was kind of going on. And I thought, okay, I'll start to develop this brand. Took advice from some other people, never split the difference on design. I wound up with a terrible design I didn't like. It wasn't really working. It was all kind of just for basic testing, no real sales, just kind of like, hey, how does this thing work? I had some friends I met who had a beer shop. They sold like cans of beer, and they actually took this first brand on. That was kind of my first sale, actually, thinking back.
So you had somebody that you knew was able to buy a little bit of a wholesale order and at least get it in their shop.
And like a case of 24. These come in cases of 24. Right. And like I wasn't even really friends with them. I just kind of started up a relationship with them on Instagram. We had a few calls. I mean, bless this guy. Like this is my level of ignorance. He kind of went, what's your sale price? I sent him a figure, kind of thinking, don't leave money on the table. And he went, I'd have to sell that for this amount. And it was like 50% more than I thought it would be.
Yeah.
It's like, what do you mean? I was like, it's a price, subtract VAT. And he goes, no. Let me explain. I probably should have Googled. Let me explain to you pricing structure. And we're good friends now. And this is why
it's nice that he did. It's nice that he took that time. Yeah.
Most people wouldn't do that. They just hang up the phone or quit the email and kind of be like, done. He goes, let me explain. I was like, quickly do some math. I was like, yeah, I'll do that.
Yeah, I remember the first time I was selling into wholesale, the buyer was like, yeah, so we really like to look for double Keystone. And I'm like, same thing, right? I'm Googling. The internet was slower double then. Keystone. So I'm like having to, what is Keystone pricing? Oh, they want to mark it up 100%. So they want retail price. They want at least half of that. And then wholesale is going to be wanting half of that, right? And so I'm like, oh, but same thing, Googling. But again, at least the internet's fast now, so you get the answers quickly while you're on, while you're talking to people. But so that's cool. So he was able to walk you through some pricing, help you figure that out. And your first case of 24.
Yeah, he kind of took that, and he took a few more. I didn't really push it because again, it was still part of like R&D testing phase. I mean, we thought it was definitely a stable, safe product, but
sure.
But I went through. I knew the canner at the time. I quickly learned wasn't right. Transport company wasn't quite right. I've been through like 4 different warehouses here for various reasons across licensing and certificates and the way they operate and all these things like that. So I learned a lot about that. So it's learning about transport, learning about transporting alcohol under bond from parts of Europe before Brexit, now after Brexit, which is this whole other nightmare we won't get into because I'll probably cry. And how did the warehouse handle it? And how do we, all these things like that. And I kind of stopped and went, I met this other guy who's a great brand strategist, and we hit it off. And he's got his own other drinks brand that's like not in the alcohol space. And he helped me work together to kind of rebrand this thing and make it what it was. The other thing that we had happen to, I like to say we, because I wrote my poor wife into working with me on this, is got hit with a trademark dispute with the name I had at the time. It wasn't Defy.
Oh, interesting.
And I didn't like the name. The name was just kind of chosen out of can't think of anything better. Heck with it.
Sure.
And it didn't fit the branding and so I kind of looked at it, spoke to my lawyer here in the UK who knows about these things. And she was like, you could fight it. You might win, but it'll take 18 months before you know for certain. I was like, I can't wait that long. I was like, I don't even like it. You can have it. So I spent all the time figuring out like, how do we get another one? Let's secure the trademark first. Let's get that down. Got all that, did a rebrand. It was just about to launch and then pandemic. So kind of went, is this really the right time to launch an alcohol brand?
And well, what's interesting is alcohol sales climbed, but I don't know if new entrants climbed during that time, right? Because it's harder to get, people are just ordering what they know, right? Because it was harder to buy new things and things like that. You couldn't go just browse, not walking and browsing the liquor store the way you used to. And consumption obviously dropped in restaurants and things like that, but home consumption increased. Just a lot of interesting variables that if you're new would be really, really tough. So like as we started to come out of all of that stuff, what did you see starting to happen with Defy?
I launched my first product, my lovely white wine. I have one here before me.
Nice.
I got these all over the house, unfortunately. And I launched the white wine last May, really. So I had everything together. I did a production run with the new canner I was working with. And we worked everything out, worked out the processes and methods and how this was going to be, all those things I've learned about like everything you want to do to a bulk container of wine that's like shipped in the right container, has been filled, blah, blah, blah. Got my designs, figured out how to do my labels and, all those other things out, kind of worked with my design team to kind of get that straight and then produced that probably like that December before. And then kind of gave it out to a few friends and family to try and stuff like that. Like no one's buying this, just like handing it out. And they're like, yeah, this is good. And then started to build things up. And the first like real sale after that, it's just basically me contacting people. Like I came up with a sales strategy for better, for worse. And like I said, I'm pretty good about organizing things. So I needed a free option because I found there's no end to companies out there that want to take a small business's money kind of going, oh, it's only $10 a month. It's only,
Yep.
And I learned to be really strict about where do I need to spend money? Like I'd rather this be a real absolute pain and I get an ROI on it than just kind of spend money because it's a little bit easier.
Yep.
So it was like Google Sheets and Trello. I've been using Trello for years, I'm good about setting these boards up. Like what's my process? And then I had a big sales funnel on there. And it was just that. I went to independence first and I was just selling cases of 24. I was sending samples out. I met a packaging designer. Turns out he lives down the road from me. We're good friends now. We developed all this packaging, got these printed up, and I was just selling those to kind of whoever would take them.
So a big part of what you said earlier is the first purchase is a big deal, but the reorder is where it really speaks volumes. So when did you start seeing like the light coming on that people liked your product?
Probably a few months after that, because fairly quickly they're like, oh, the white wine's great. Because I came from the school of do one thing and do it really well. But
big believer that.
The thing that I kind of found with that was, at least with wine, is how do you define one thing when you're a wine brand? Right. To most people, one thing meant at least have all three colors, red, white, and rosé.
Sure.
Like that's what because initially I was fighting that. I was like, it's ridiculous. Like who walks into a shop and goes, I like this white, I want their rosé or their red, Sure. Turns out a lot of people or businesses seem to want that. So it's figuring out like who's the businesses really quickly that like this thing. Like traditional wine shops, they didn't get it. I was trying to almost argue with them about how wine in a can is not lower quality than wine in a bottle. So craft beer, craft cocktail people, they were our customers. We were cannibalizing those markets into wine. But quickly they were like, where's your red and rosé? Yeah. I was like, oh. So I was getting the money together to kind of like do production runs of those, get the red and the rosé in. New learning, I lost a batch of red on the way.
Oof.
And stubborn perseverance. I had a claim against the company that took a year for them to pay out. They just paid out a few weeks ago. But that was like every week. What's the status? I mean, the people were super nice, but it was just, ongoing.
Yeah, they're not gonna rush to settle. It's gonna take a while. So
with it, I got the money back. Yeah.
So you launched, barely a year ago, really, right? You're really getting into
with just one product.
Yeah. And you've got the 3 coming. You're getting ready to be launching in the US here in the next few months.
Yeah.
What's your big goal for, let's say, the next 3 years? What does DeFi look like 3 years from now?
Oh gosh. So nationwide sales across the UK. The UK, to really move weight when you're an independent drinks brand, seems to be supermarkets. So we just got our first supermarket listing. It's like a high-end organic supermarket called Planet's Organic. We got that a few weeks ago. I keep saying months. Got our first international hotel chain listing. They kind of love it. We ended up accidentally launching kegs of wine last year because I'd done some in my R&D, and I spoke to a bar and they're like, can you do wine on tap? And I was like, I can. So we've got a few bars and pubs around the UK, and we're their exclusive wine, we're their house wine, because they love it. We haven't even marketed though, so that's a whole other route to market. So I want to get into more pubs and restaurants. I'd like 2 airline listings. I'm speaking to some airlines.
Very cool.
And yeah, I want nationwide across America, really. I've got a team set up there with experience in alcohol. We're speaking to people. We have our plan for launch. And it's just a matter of kind of getting that stuff up and running. I'm having some conversations with the Nordics. With the risk of taking too much on, I'm really interested in Japan because the RTD market there is really interesting.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. They like dominate vending machines.
Yeah.
But I love it. And I love that in your R&D, you ended up with some kegs and you ended up launching, like, that ended up becoming a product. I'm seeing that kind of stuff more different types of product than just beer on tap. You're seeing like kombuchas on tap and wines on tap and stuff like that. You're seeing more and more. It's really neat. All right. So we're going to make a pivot here for you, Leslie.
Great.
As we come to the end of this, to me, entrepreneurship, as much as it's about creating and about building things that you love, it's also about creating a lifestyle that you love. So what's one thing that Leslie is going to accomplish, not Defy Wine, but what's one thing you're going to do, be, or have in the next 12 months?
Oh gosh. Sadly, I'm going to go visit my parents because I haven't done that in like 2.5 years. I say
That's
sadly,
an
I love
important
my
one.
parents.
That's
I love
an
my
important
parents.
one. Yeah,
I haven't gone back. I keep blaming the pandemic and then work. I still work on this every day, every weekend. So I'm going to get myself to stop doing that. I'm going to take more vacation.
Smart. I think that's huge. So there's always the startup phase where you kind of burn the candle at both ends. It's really important to remember that shouldn't be sustained forever, right? You have to take that season of breaks and stuff as well as the entrepreneur. So, well, Leslie, really appreciate you coming out on the show. Everyone, I encourage you to go check out defy.wine. They've got some really cool opportunities to support them as they come here into the US. And there's some really neat things coming, ways that you can just support them, or even just go follow them, check out what they're doing, check out their website, check out their socials, defy.wine. Leslie, thank you again so much for coming out on the show. And to all my entrepreneurs, all my biz ninjas, wherever you're listening, watching, or tuning in, it's your turn to go out and do something.